I think if you are producing content on TikTok and getting paid through their creator program for views, you might just want to get in and get those views and get paid. But we're building a media company, and we're building one that's based on trust, that reaches the audience that we care about. So while I do love our reach numbers, I'm more focused on building trust with that audience.
I'm Patrick J. McGinnis, and I coined the term FOMO. That's short for fear of missing out, and it's why some people end up following the crowd when they should be blazing a trail of their own. But if you want to achieve greatness in business and life, you've got to break free. Come on, I'll show you how. This is FOMO Sapiens, where we explore how entrepreneurial thinkers find the inspiration and the courage to build exceptional lives. Welcome back to FOMO Sapiens, the show for entrepreneurial thinkers. I'm your host, Patrick J. McGinnis, and today we're talking to Victoria Waters, co-founder of Dry Atlas. Now, Victoria, as I said, is the co-founder of Dry Atlas, the media company focused on alcohol alternatives with a mission to demystify and expand this new category. Dry Atlas reaches over 160,000 customers monthly and provides resources to help non-alc brands grow. Prior to Dry Atlas, Victoria and her husband, Douglas, founded Spirited Away, America's first non-alcoholic bottle shop in Soho, New York City. I am a shopper there. And before all of these entrepreneurial ventures, she spent 1 decade as a brand and content marketer in New York City. Probably most importantly, she's a graduate of Georgetown University, Hoya Saxa. Welcome to the show, Victoria.
Hoya Saxa, thanks so much for having me, Patrick.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Now, a little background on you and I. We met at a party, an art party about NFTs. Remember those?
Never forget the NFT craze.
Yeah. So we endured longer than NFTs, but we will talk about all these things in a second. We always start this show with the same question. And even though I could talk about NFTs with you for, well, not that long because there's not much to say, I'm going to start with our standard question, which is this. What is something unexpected you learned about yourself that changed everything?
Well, Patrick, not to get too heavy at the outset, although I'm sure this is a probing question for most of your guests, the only way I can answer that honestly is the strength I found following the unexpected death of my brother last year. And what I learned about myself through that experience was that I'm so much stronger than I think, and I can do so much more than I think. And if you had asked me ahead of time, how would I respond in that situation? How would I done in the weeks and months following? I would have guessed completely shut down, can't do anything, can't help anyone. And it was actually quite the opposite. I did everything for my parents. I did everything taking care of logistics, all the while handling that situation internally. And I also realized that I had a lot of support around me. I think there's a tendency for people like us to be hyper independent and to think that we need to carry everything on our own shoulders. But I also learned that while I'm internally way stronger than I think, I learned that I can depend on others and take risks and do things that potentially felt outside of my comfort zone with their support. So I couldn't have done that without the support of my husband, my closest friends. And through that experience, it was really just a few months later that I decided to finally make the leap from my decade-long corporate career to start Dry Atlas with my husband, Douglas. And I think another thing that unexpected death teaches you, and I think anyone who's experienced that might resonate with this, that the idea that life is so short. Coming out of my 20s in New York, you feel invincible and like this will all go on forever. I could get hit by a bus on my way to lunch after this interview. And I really thought, if I'm ever going to accomplish my goal of owning my own business in life, if it doesn't happen now, when will it happen?
So many people have that realization or that jarring external event so late. So the change that they really want to make, the life they want to live, they delay it. And then they come to that later on. It all happens to us in our own time. And to find something positive from such a difficult experience and then take action upon it is a real honor to, the legacy of your brother and to yourself. So thank you for sharing that. I remember when that happened, you emailed me about it, but we haven't really discussed it. So, bringing this to the show and sharing it with everybody is something that I think, I really appreciate you doing. Now, it's hard to I don't want to make a hard left turn here, but I do want to, it's like, how does one, I was thinking like, this is a very somber way to begin, which it should be. But one thing that I've noticed about you, so let us talk about what's happened in the last year or so. I saw you at a rooftop party, which was your going away party from New York. You and your husband then went on this like world travel nomadic thing. You're now resettled in New Orleans. You started a company. You've done a lot of things, and you've also had some very interesting experiences on social media. So we're going to talk about all this stuff, but what it really makes me think, my friend, is that you're a total FOMO sapiens. Mm-hmm. And FOMO sapiens is a good thing, but it can also be something that, you think about. It's like doing a million things and being spread all over the place. So how, tell us a little bit about how it feels intentional to me. Like you guys kind of made a plan. You've kind of changed the way you live your life, from corporate life in New York City to being entrepreneurs, traveling, and then selling a new place. Like, how did you kind of come up with the game plan?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question, because even if you embody the FOMO sapien ethos, I think that the flip side of that can be trying to, as you pursue the path that you might have missed out on, then taking on too much or trying to do it all, which itself is a fool's errand. And it's a different kind of FOMO. So I feel like life is all about these microcycles, and these themes come up no matter how you approach a problem. I would say for us, from a FOMO perspective, especially as we were uprooting our life and embarking on over a year of living abroad, the key for us was to focus on one business idea. I think a lot of people will quit their job and think that they can take on 3 or 4 projects. In fact, that was what I was thinking when I was first envisioning leaving my corporate job. And luckily, I was able to draw from everything I learned watching Douglas with his first business, Spirited Away, the retail store in Nolita, and just see the power of focusing on one thing. And day in, day out, he was focused on building that into the specialty retail store it is today. So I knew that I couldn't take on a million projects just because I had freed up my time from my corporate day job. But at the same time, we were able to pursue a lot of novelty and new experiences in living abroad nomadically for the year. We still stuck to about 1 country per month, which even that, I would say, for aspiring nomads was a bit too rapid. I'd probably do 1 a quarter going forward. But we got to meet with amazing producers, brands, beverage industry folks across the world. I got to do a lot of surfing. We got to do a lot of decompressing at the end of many years in New York City, which, Patrick, is a difficult place to not let the FOMO get to you.
Yeah, it is. Having said that, let's talk about Dry Atlas, because you were working in, big corporate fancy jobs. You left to become an entrepreneur in the non-alc space, which is a hot space, by the way. And your husband came on the show when you were first launching it. This was like the early days. And you guys were at my house. I was drinking non-alcoholic spirits. And I was like, you should come talk about this. This is a trend we want to talk about, because, FOMO sapiens, like the alcohol and FOMO. Wow. Put those two together, right, and it's called drunk. And so the idea of having an alternative, and I love this idea. This is like an emerging trend. You see so many people that say, I don't want to drink tonight. Let me have something else. But at the same time, it's like, funny enough, there's like FOBO happening, because there's so many options. It's hard to know what's good. There's terrible things. There's good things. It's messy. So talk about how the business has developed from, when Douglas came on, it was just kind of like the early days. Like now I saw 160,000 people reached. That's whoa. Like where are things today? What did you learn? What have you built? What's going on?
Sure. And it's actually over 300,000 monthly now.
You got to update that bio.
Rapidly growing. Yes. I think since we booked this interview, we've seen a nice influx of new consumers.
Amazing.
Thank you. It's, I think the power of compounding especially in a media company, as you know, Patrick, showing up every day and putting that great content out, it starts to come back in a nice way. So I would say it's evolved a lot since we had the concept. Dry Atlas started as a directory of alcohol alternatives. So we aimed to catalog all of the non-alcoholic spirits, wines, beers, ready-to-drink cocktails globally. And we still have that as a component of our business, that beverage directory. We track now close to 1,700 of these products that are on the market. So your point about FOMO is real. It's pretty dizzying if you were to try to just stay on top of even what is the top 10% of quality there. And then we really evolved Dry Atlas into the full-fledged media company that it is today, reaching both consumers and industry insiders. And my background being in content marketing, it was just a natural evolution, I think, to take this directory, this resource that we had created, and then really expand Dry Atlas into the one-stop resource for all things non-alcoholic beverage news, insights, recommendations, beyond just the directory that we started with.
FOMO. Do you have what's interesting is, so when you're building something new, you started from one place, which was like a kind of a one vertical, right? Which is cool. And I imagine what you realize is like, okay, it's really hard to grow this. It's not broad enough. We're attracting some people, but like there's a lot of people we're just not going to hit with this because they're not looking for this kind of content. Like it was much more of a shopper focused experience, a comparison site, as I recall. Now, how did you figure out though? Like, did you have a model? Did you look at certain companies that you said, oh, you know what? Let's be like the X of X. Like, the way people are like, I want to be the Uber of pet walking or whatever. Like, how did you come up with like figuring out what that business should look like?
And I would say, Patrick, that's been my favorite part of entrepreneurship is the learning by doing and being small and nimble enough that you can experiment. I love that we have an idea of where we're going, but things can change. And that's, I think, the most exciting thing about striking out on your own for anyone who's considering it. We learned a lot from that first model. One thing we learned is that online reviews, which it was very focused on rate and review, it's tricky today, before you even consider the explosion of AI generated content, tricky to know what reviews to trust. And in a subjective category like beverage, taste is quite literally different. So we figured there is a desire here to learn more about the category, but the lens of rate and review is not necessarily going to be the one that we want to pursue. So we kept the directory, we dropped the ratings and the review, and instead of focusing on getting more reviews and ratings, we just focused on creating more and more valuable content that spans the category. And you might think, in 2024, do we really need more content? I think at a mass level, probably not. But for niche special interests coming from people like Douglas and me that have that expertise, I think there is a lot of demand. So to your question about inspiration, I took a lot of inspiration from niche publications. I think one I really respect is called Double Blind. It explores the untold stories in psychedelics, and they take a more magazine editorial-driven route. And psychedelics is a more nuanced topic in so many ways than non-alcoholic beverages as a category. But I took a lot of inspiration from niche media platforms like theirs and saw that with especially the explosion of AI-generated content, anyone can really create content, even talking head TikTok videos, which are some of our best performing content. So we really want to bring our expertise and reach those people who want to dive deeper into this space and not just have that cursory surface level understanding.
You just teed up. It's like, I don't know if you're like reading my notes from over my shoulder. I see that you're over there, but I wanted to talk about social media. So ever since I known you, and it's been a couple of years now, we probably met in the middle of a pandemic or something, 2021, something like that. And one of these illicit, it's like, I'm at a dinner party at somebody's house and yet there's a pandemic. We did it. It wasn't illegal, everybody, but it was like, you're still like, am I going to get COVID tonight?
It was on the cusp.
We did not. But I remember you were a TikToker. You made TikToks and they were really cool. And I'm not a TikTok guy because I can't. But I remember that you had built up some expertise there and you've deployed that into the new company with some success. In fact, you had one Instagram reel that did over 8 million views, if I'm correct, right?
Correct.
So talk about it's such an interesting topic. Everybody wants to use social media to promote their company, yet few people have the level of success you've had. What's your secret, and how important has it been in your growth?
Mm-hmm. I would say from the outside, social media, especially short form video, can look like an overnight success. And that can be discouraging for people who are considering that channel. And I would say, Patrick, maybe challenge your fixed mindset. I think you could, if you wanted to, get into this format, but podcasting is where you really shine.
Well,
so
I just want to say TikTok,
time.
it just makes me feel bad when I'm on it. The content, like I don't like consuming it.
There is an element of what they call brain rot, and this idea of just rapidly skimming through videos as you numb out. And that's certainly not where we're playing, but it can be an experience that one has on these apps. But I would say for me, video has been something I've been so interested in for as long as I can remember. I think people who grew up in the 90s remember stealing the home video camera from their mom or dad and making those home videos. I went to film camp in the summer in 6th grade and just loved learning. At that time, iMovie had just launched. I loved learning how do you put together an engaging story. And through my career in content marketing, even though I was at a large brand like JP Morgan, there was still a lot to apply from the true filmmaking world. And I honed those skills there. And with my own experiments on TikTok, helping my dad grow his account on TikTok, he's got over 100,000 followers. He's all on his own now, so can't take credit anymore. But I've been experimenting with this medium for so many years, just purely out of fun. And Patrick, when we met, that TikTok account was just purely for creative expression, and learned a lot. And you can learn a lot just by playing around for fun. Whether TikTok stays available to us is a question, but I think short form video has a role to play in the consumption of media for years to come. I'd love to experiment with long form video and longer form storytelling, but it's something that I think everybody can be a creator. It's just applying the principles of storytelling to different mediums. The principles stay forever the same.
I didn't realize, it's interesting, like this, you made it look so easy, but you've been preparing for this for your entire life. And I think that's one of the things that it's like really easy for a person like me to sit here and look at what you've done and be like, oh, I should be, and be frustrated or think like, how is she doing it? And I see it. I'm like, how does she do this? Right. But I never realized, and it makes me feel a lot better now that this is something that you have really trained yourself at for a long time. So the reason you're good at it is because of the hard work of years that have accumulated. Now, some people, during the pandemic with all this free time, they did their 10,000 hours, whatever. Although I think that number's kind of been proven wrong, but we get the point. Like you kind of put in your time, but other people build it up over time. What I also found interesting was we just talked about one thing that when I do have FOMO about TikToks and Instagram stories and how they, when they're really successful and I want one and all that sort of stuff. But you told me some stats that I thought were quite interesting. You had this reel that did over 8 million views and you got around 2,000 new followers, which is nothing to sneeze at. But, I think we think from the outside, 8 million views, you're going to get like, I don't know, 500,000 followers out of it. And I think that's the takeaway here is that it is not, there are no overnight hits in any of this stuff, unless you're like you're like, you start dating Taylor Swift or something like one of those things, a real world event. But online, the algo, anything that's driven by the algo, I don't think it doesn't happen. So yeah, talk about, I guess, I'd love your thoughts on that. Just like in general, how you think about kind of staying in the game and not getting discouraged or not getting tired of it all.
And I think your point about the results from that 8.5 million view reel brings up something about social media. I have a love-hate relationship with short form video in particular, because often a piece of content will get reach precisely because it's inflammatory. And while we don't like to make our content at Dry Atlas intentionally inflammatory, we are in the business of revisiting the role of alcohol in our normalized consumer life. We don't talk about consumer behavioral change. We don't tell people to drink less alcohol, but sometimes even talking about non-alcoholic tequila, for example, will invite a mob who thinks that that as a product category shouldn't even exist. So those disagreements in the comment section and shares, angry shares, can help pump that algorithm and get you seen to more and more people. But I actually exclude that 8.5 million video in our reach. Similarly, a video on TikTok with about 1.4 million views. These, to me, I've assessed have gone viral for what I think are potentially less valuable reasons. They've gone viral because it's reaching a segment of people who aren't actually interested in my category or to even seriously consider it. And it's more devolved into a bit of a debate in the comment section, which in the case of my reel that did nearly 9 million views, I quite literally wouldn't have time to even read each individual comment because there were nearly 100,000 of them.
So, oh my goodness. Now you know what it's like to be famous.
Your brain does have a difficult time comprehending that. So I would say my goal with the content creation isn't just virality. I think if you are producing content on TikTok and getting paid through their creator program for views, you might just want to get in and get those views and get paid. But we're building a media company and we're building one that's based on trust, that reaches the audience that we care about. So while I do love our reach numbers, I'm more focused on building trust with that audience. And I think short form video can be a way to achieve that. But the focus shouldn't be, I think, on, I want this video to pop off and get millions of views. If you're lucky, and by that I mean if you're strategic and you've put the work in, you might hit the right side of the algorithm with millions of views and then be able to build that trust. You see a lot of small businesses do quite well on TikTok that way. But I would say, for me, I don't pay attention too much to those numbers. It can be a bit of a hedonic treadmill. You know, you hit a certain reach and then you just want the next reach. I think that's a very FOMO adjacent concept that I think a lot about. And actually, one of the reasons I was inspired to quit my corporate career was that I saw more promotions and increased compensation wasn't actually going to make me happier. It was that hedonic treadmill in action.
Yeah, it's the external validation, the sugar high of that. You're right. I mean, it's sort of like you get all these views, and that's cool, by the way. It shows you're doing something and you learn. And you know, your content has reached people and resonated, and maybe somebody learned something. So hooray for that. But that sugar high is not a business builder. And you have to think about, who is my core audience member? What do I want to give this person that will have them coming back to me, not just watching my viral video, but watching, like, scrolling deep into my content. That's the magic, and creating something that has real value and that lasts. It's funny. Speaking of the other night I opened up my Instagram. I don't know what the heck happened, but I got like 200 new followers in about 4 minutes. And I have no idea why. And it was such an interesting moment of like, I was like, how do I do that? I want to do that again and again and again. But of course I have no idea why it was. And it's sort of like a blip. Who knows what I did, but it messes with your head. And so I have my little hangover. I have my little Instagram hangover right now as a result. Before we get to the lightning round, I want to talk about one thing I think about you, and I think you and I have this in common a little bit, is you're a trend surfer. I just made that term up, but I think maybe that's a new word we can use. And the idea is, the reason I say that is you're always early. You're early to stuff. You were early to non-alc. You were in cryptos. You and I was an advisor from your NFT company that existed for about a very short amount of time. But that was fun. You also, have looked at like the whole psychedelic spaces you mentioned earlier. So you're combining the classical stuff that smart people have of a great education and all that sort of stuff with this uncanny ability to spot stuff, and then being willing to actually get in on them and jump onto the train, as it were. And I'm curious, like, some of these things work and some of them do not, like NFTs. Mm-hmm. Like, had you gone all in on NFTs, right now you would not be sitting in the nice apartment you're in, because, you probably have spent all your money on virtual real estate. And so my question is, like, what have you learned about what lasts, what's real in the emerging trends, and what is smoke, if anything?
Well, I think you need to immerse yourself seriously and you need to go beyond the headlines. One thing I learned while working in the crypto space for years was that the headlines really did not match what I was seeing on the ground. And while crypto can mean a lot of things, mostly I was focused on Bitcoin. And you can see with Bitcoin's price action today, it's still here to stay.
Yeah.
So I think there is a lot of hype with these categories. But if you fully immerse yourself, you can separate the noise from what is actually valuable. So in the case of crypto, a lot of the NFT space became noise, but Bitcoin persisted. And I had access and involvement to both of those areas. I would say failing fast is a goal of mine. I never want to cling to something from a sunk cost perspective. And I never want to avoid something just because I don't fully understand it. So you do need to do both. You need to get yourself immersed in the topic to understand it and see, are there any elements of this that are worth my time? So I would say my NFT IP licensing platform, while there was actually a lot of inbound investor interest at the peak of that hype cycle, at the end of the day, I thought this is not something with longevity, whereas I do believe the shift toward alcohol alternatives is. And I think we have, for example, the reevaluation of cigarettes in our society as a not perfect, but somewhat analogy to the role I think alcohol will take in coming decades. And I do feel like we are still early to that in the alcohol alternative space. I do feel we are still early to Bitcoin in the scheme of things. And psychedelics, I think, will have, while it's hypey right now, I think they will have an increasingly normalized and legalized role in our life. I think down the line, I could explore that as I see the legalization take root or not. But I take a lot of inspiration from Ben Branson, who is the founder of Seedlip, really one of the original non-alcoholic spirit brands. He sold to Diageo in a $500 million deal. So a big exit to one of the biggest alcohol companies. And he told me that he always has a number of ideas cooking in his head, and he treats them like presents. And he gives himself time to go up to the idea attic and open one of these presents and engage with it, and then not have any pressure to do anything with it, but stay involved in that idea. And that's how I treat a lot of these trends and trend surfing, as you mentioned it, Patrick. I'm 100% focused on Dry Atlas today. I could stay focused there, or I could stay in the alcohol alternatives thesis and do something else. But I always have my eye on where is society going next, not only because I think that's where the business opportunities are, but also because I'm just interested in being part of building where we're going, not sustaining the status quo.
Yeah, I was thinking as you're talking, I have a lot of thoughts. I mean, first of all, I was thinking about clinging to the thing that doesn't work. Like I was just thinking about people who, this is very dark, but you're living in a place that bad things are happening. It's a neighborhood, it's a country. And you know the people who stay behind are often the ones who never make it out. And the ones who leave, there's a lot of risk and pain, but they build the next thing. Same with businesses, it's the same way. People hang on to their startups going nowhere versus just throwing in the towel and starting the new thing. Then in terms of trends, you mentioned something about non-alc is like, what I think what sets it apart from like a NFT kind of thing is you're not asking, it is proven that there is utility for a group of people. Mm-hmm. And therefore you're not asking people to radically change human behavior. What you're saying is a bunch of people have already jumped onto this bandwagon. And same with psychedelics, right? I mean, it was like, it was sort of given a bad name during the 70s and outlawed and stuff, but like people have been using these things in religious ceremonies and elsewhere or just socially for a long time. And you know what? They're still here. So clearly, and they continue to use them. So they see some utility, right? So it's kind of like if you can find something where there is product market fit for somebody and you think that societal trends will widen its appeal, that's a lot easier than, I mean, Bitcoin, it's around, but that's like a big change, right? You're asking people to like get a wallet and write down some password and like hide it in their safe, which is still to me like insane that even exists. FOMO. All right, let's jump to the lightning round. I got 4 questions. Are you ready for this?
I am ready.
All right. Number 1, what is a favorite quote?
A favorite quote is that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step.
Oh, I love that. It's like writing a book. Just like writing a book. Number 2, name, speaking of books, a book or podcast that every FOMO sapiens should know about.
I would say The 4 Agreements, which is a short guide to life. For me, one of the most important of the 4 agreements is to not take anything personally. And I think that is a really good piece of advice for any aspiring entrepreneurs or anyone trying to do something a little bit different in their lives.
My brother loves that book. Shout out to Mike McGinnis. Number 3, what's a piece of advice you give to your younger self?
I would say go for it, even when you don't feel ready.
Yeah, that's so true. And you can start part-time, right? You did that.
And I read your book.
Yeah. See, it works. Number 4, what's your most important memory?
Oh, this is a tough one. I think it would have to have something to do with my parents. And can I give one per parent? That seems only
of course.
fair.
Okay. If mom and dad are listening, we can't leave one out. So yeah, mom and dad, this is for you.
For my mom, I remember, and this pertains to Georgetown, I applied to Georgetown as one of my final applications I was submitting. And I was exhausted from that whole experience. And I won't say I phoned my essay in, but it certainly wasn't my best effort. And my mom read my college admissions essay to Georgetown and just told me bluntly, this isn't your best effort and you should consider rewriting it, which was the last thing I wanted to hear. And it certainly wasn't my SAT score compared to my peers that got me into Georgetown. I think it was that essay. I rewrote the entire thing. And that was thanks to my mom's guidance. So the memory of her pushing me to be my best in a very loving and not helicopter parenty way is one of my favorite memories. And one of the things I'm so grateful for from her. And for my dad, he has just a love of life. And my favorite memories with him are just anything we would do that's playful. And even though he was 50 years old when I was born, so quite old by the time I was old enough to be running around, I think my favorite memories with him are just being silly and playing around the house and learning not to take things too seriously, which I'm still working on, but those are my memories that I cherish.
All right, mom and dad, nice job. Nice job with this one. All right. So if you want to find out more about Victoria and Dry Atlas, you can go to the Instagram and the TikTok at the Dry Atlas, and the TikTok is at dryatlas.com. You can go to dryatlas.com. Plenty of content. Some of it viral. Go check it out. Go deep into the catalog. Victoria Waters, co-founder of Dry Atlas and social media star. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Patrick.
FOMO. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Patrick J. McGinnis, on Twitter at PJ McGinnis, and on the web at FOMOSapiens.com or PatrickMcGinnis.com, where you can get all kinds of free resources to live a more decisive and entrepreneurial life. FOMO Sapiens is recorded in New York City. Theme music is by Mike McGinnis, and editing and post-production is by Josh Elstro. If you like today's show, please be sure to rate it and recommend it to your friends. And as always, you can find me at FOMOSapiens.com and at PatrickMcGinnis.com. To advertise on FOMO Sapiens, reach out to contact@FOMOSapiens.com.